Hi, I'm Emily, and I'm gonna speak for a little while, not too long, I hope. But I wanted to try to express some things that I'm going through, and sometimes when you're in a situation where your whole life has changed in a dramatic way, it's very hard to get a grip on what's happening. And I know for a fact that I have always lived my life and did everything possible to prove myself and to also establish things that I've always wanted. I always wanted to marry, always wanted to have a family. I always wanted to go to college and succeed. Work, work is work, but we all have to work to make a living and take on responsibilities and buy house and car and all those things. But the reality for me is life is not about material things. I mean, obviously the necessities are very important to me, and providing for my family and taking care of them and being a role model to my son and trying to be the best that I can be. I am not perfect, and I always come from a background where I grew up in a dysfunctional family. However, I grew up and I learned a lot from my parents who were very good, and they taught me many good values, and they helped me to believe in myself. And though I struggled with my transgender situation and my shyness, I managed to make it in regard to, being able to go to school, college, being accepted as a human being and working. But the reality is that my life was very complicated. And I knew it's not easy for me to explain it, but I knew as a 4-year-old that I struggled with something that not many people know or understand or identify with. But for me it was a very real struggle because I didn't know what I should do. So I kept it a secret. And I was scared. I was scared to tell anyone. But the fact is I realized from a young age that I was a girl. And I knew deep down in my heart that's what I should be. And I tried to address that by dressing up and wearing girls' clothes. But it was not fulfilling to the degree that it made me feel whole as a person. It was a temporary relief to just kind of get a feeling of what it's like. And the dressing helped me considerably. I always knew in my heart that one day I would confront my transgender situation. I wasn't sure when I would, or how I would, or why I would. All I knew is that it was going to be a part of me, and I would eventually have to face it. And I wanted to be a female all my life, basically. I struggled. I wanted to transition at an early age. When I was 16, I was so depressed about not being able to be the girl that I hoped I could be. And I tried to do something that, it's a good thing it didn't happen. But realistically, I was in pain, and I felt the only way out of the pain emotionally was to consider suicide. And I did. I've done it many times. Because when you feel different, and you can't tell anyone, and you have this huge secret, it's very hard to carry on because your life is really nothing but pretend. And I was trying my best to do all I could to survive. but deep down I wanted to be a female, and it was so hard for me because I couldn't tell my parents. My parents were both sick. They struggled with depression. They were in the hospital many times. My dad worked as an iron worker. He saw death in his business, which led him to drink to escape the pain. For me, to escape my pain, I wore dresses, and it helped me. It helped me in a way that at least I could feel somewhat expressive of my feminine side. I was a young kid, and I knew right away that I was not the typical boy. And I don't have anything against being born a boy. That was what I was. You know, my parents loved me, and I had to find a way to just cope. And I did cope. I mean, I did a lot in my life. I was very fortunate that I was able to marry and even have a son. So I'm very thrilled with that. I have a family. And if I transitioned at a early age, I would not have had that opportunity. I would never know what it was like to be a father. So I have the joy of being a father, having a son who I love. My son struggles. He's autistic. But, you know, we all have to struggle somehow in our life. Life isn't perfect. But what we try to do is we try to make the most of what we have. You know, we can't be everything to everyone. But if we can be truthful to ourselves and live our life with honesty, integrity, courage, faith, and just reaching out and loving people, and not being pretending, not being a phony, being real, speaking from the heart, expressing who you truly are as a person, that's what life should be about. It should not be about pretending and making believe you're someone who you're not. And believe it or not, there are a lot of phonies in the world. And I could never, ever stomach anyone who was a phony. I accepted them, but I knew in my heart that they were just not legitimately real. And what's the whole point of living if you're not genuine, you're not real as a person? The whole thing that makes us a human being is accepting who we are and not being a pretend. Living your life as you were supposed to, not because I was born a boy that I had to live my life as a boy, but knowing in my heart I was a girl and realized that's who I was and who I am. And I had the guts and the courage. Years later, I mean, I'm talking years later, I knew I was a girl at 4, but I didn't come out officially until I was 51. So I struggled for many years, but I did manage to realize that I could be expressive, I could be a girl, and I am living as a girl. And you know, it's not easy. It really isn't. I have been struggling. I'm depressed. It has nothing to do with me transitioning to be a female. It has more to do with a lifelong struggle of not being able to reveal my true inner self, living a lie, and just not being truthful to people. I never told my mom, never told my dad. I came out at 30-something years old, and I came out in a way that was a very shy way to do it, but I didn't know any other way to do it. And it was only a limited way. It was sending 3 letters in a Christmas card at Christmas time many, many years ago when I was in my early 30s and my mom had already passed away. And I sent it to my 2 sisters and one of my closest and bestest of friends. And they read the letter and they broached the topic very briefly, and we never discussed it further. So it wasn't a real coming out, because it kind of died right then and there. They expressed that they got the letter, they read the letter, they were touched by it, but I could never go out and address myself as a female at that point in my life, because first of all, I still had my living arrangements were still with my dad, and I had to respect my dad, and I never wanted to hurt him. And I believed that if I came out and told him, it would really devastate him, and that was not what I was about. I respected my dad, I loved my dad, and I held him in the highest of esteem, just like I did with my mom. So I struggled, and I kept it inside. I buried it in my heart. So I never really was truthful to who I really was as a person. And I had to put on a facade, and I had to pretend. And I didn't want to just go through my whole life pretending. And it took tragedy for me to finally break through. Sadly, it took tragedy. My father committed suicide 4 years ago, and it was devastating because he did it in such a way that it impacted us in such a painful way that we just couldn't accept it. But we had no choice. But my poor dad was so depressed that one day he decided that he needed to just go and get rid of the pain he suffered by jumping in front of a train. And that's how he died. And it was a struggle for us. Telling my son was the hardest thing I ever had to do, and I delayed it for as long as I could. But when he asked me, how come Pop doesn't come by, I did not know how to answer him. And it was truthfully very painful. I had a very good friend who also comforted me during my trials and during that time when I struggled with my father's death. Moses, who I knew from work, he was a bookkeeper at a client's office, and I went there as a CPA representing a CPA firm. And I became friends with him over time. We weren't just professionals, we became friends. We talked about our families, our children, my son, his daughter, and we bonded, and we went out to lunch on occasion, and we were good friends. And it's so sad. But 2 years later, after my father's death, I learned that he had passed away, and he was only 40. He left behind a wife and a baby daughter. And when I went to the wake, I was just in such pain, and I cried, and I just couldn't deal with it. It was so painful for me, but I had to try to deal with it. But I needed to get help also. I went to a therapist. When I went to my therapist, they talked about everything that I was dealing with. My son with his struggles with autism, his doing miserable in school, about my father and his tragic demise, about my mother who starved herself to death many, many years earlier, and we witnessed it, about my struggles with shyness, about my feelings of insecurity and low self-esteem. And finally, one day I had the courage to discuss my transgender. And when I opened up about that, my therapist wanted to explore that and focus on that. And in doing so, it made me realize what I was hiding all my life. And she and I cried at times because my pain was very evident. And one day I asked her, I had brought a change of clothes. I came in a suit and tie from work, but I asked if I could change into a pair of clothes to show her the other side of me. So I went into the little waiting room because I was her last patient for the night. So I had privacy, and I dressed in a pretty dress, and it was a pink dress. And when I went back into the room, she looked at me and she said, "Oh my God, Emily, you are a girl, and it's quite evident." And I knew it all my life. And she knew it. She recognized it immediately. And that's when I had the realization that I had no choice but to transition. But it was painful because I had to go tell people. I had to tell my family. I had to tell my son. I had to go to my employer and tell my employer. I lost my job in the process. And I was lucky to find another job with the help of my CPA firm that I used to work for. However, within 7 months of working at the job, they let me go. And it was because the practice manager, who liked me and respected me and always held me in high regard and treated me as Emily, had gotten, I guess, resistance from the owner. And he pressured her into finding a way to let me go. And I was devastated. I had a nervous breakdown. I collapsed in the office. I wound up in the hospital. And that was in Bellevue in the city. And subsequent to that, not working, and trying to get on unemployment and trying to do all the things I needed to do, I didn't know what to do, and I was scared. And I wound up going to the hospital again. Not just once, but 3 more times. And once I was admitted after going to my therapist at Beth Israel, who I go to for aftercare. My doctor, I should say. I have a therapist and a doctor, but I actually went to see my doctor. And I told her the night before that I was feeling so much pressure because we were facing the reality of foreclosure. And I had tried to get in touch, and I did get in touch with the mortgage company to express my need for financial hardship. But a week later, after going through this whole story and requesting financial hardship, they called me and they demanded me make payment on the 2 missed payments when I had just spoke to them a week before. And they didn't just call me once, they called me 4 times. So I was so devastated and so depressed that night I wanted to just say, I've had it. And I reached for the medicine cabinet and I took 10 aspirin and 5 to 10 sleeping pills. And I mixed it up and I drank it with a glass of water. And I went to sleep with a dress on, hoping that I would never wake up again. But I did wake up, and I had a doctor appointment, and I couldn't miss it. So I went to my doctor. I had a stomach ache, and I told my doctor what I did. And she had me admitted, but before she admitted me into the psych ward, she had me evaluated for physical problems that could have resulted from the overdose. And once they cleared me, I was in the psych ward for 4 days. I wasn't in the actual psych ward, I was in the intermediary where you're waiting to get a room. But I happened to be there for 4 days. And I felt better after the 4 days being there, so they let me have the decision to leave, which I opted to do. And I had to give a lot of thought to what I did and try to gain inner strength to fight my depression and just try to do what I have to do, because I have a son, 14, autistic, who needs me desperately in his life. And I can't leave him. I can't do something like that. I lost my dad to suicide. It was a very painful experience. And though I struggle with depression and want to end my pain, I have to find the inner strength to carry on and break the cycle of depression. I can't really truly break that cycle because I live with depression. I've lived with it all my life. But I have to try to be strong enough to cope. And today I was blessed by receiving a phone call from a friend who I used to run cross country with. His name is Teddy Canova, and he reached out to me and he spoke to me on the phone just like my friend Moses did years ago. And he told me that I have to fight and be strong, and that there are many people who care about me. I have many high school friends who care about me and they're worried for me. And Teddy touched me in such a way and made me realize that there are people who are worried for me and concerned for me, and that I'm not alone, even though I feel alone and isolated and very depressed. And I feel like I am trying to do what I can to survive. I'm trying to advocate for my son. I'm trying to do videos to get my message out that I'm a good person. I'm transgender. I suffer from depression. I struggle from intense shyness. But, my life has changed somewhat. As Emily, I can speak. I can talk. And if my camera wasn't limited to half-hour intervals, literally I could speak for hours. I have so much in my mind to talk about. I love to write, and my writing is spontaneous. I don't think before I write. I just write, and it just flows, just like I'm speaking to you. I don't prepare what I'm going to say. I just talk. Because I was at a point in my life where I realized that if I don't talk, if I don't open up, and I keep it inside, it's gonna kill me. So I realized I have a choice. I can come out. I can maybe make an influence, or be an influence to other people. Maybe touch somebody and help them. Because I knew in my heart that if I didn't come out, if I didn't fight, and if I lived in the closet for the rest of my life, I would have been a miserable person. And I would not really truly appreciate my life. Though I do appreciate many things in my life. Like my wife, like my son, like my achievements. I've done a good amount in my life that I can say I tried to do everything I possibly wanted. There are things that I always wanted to do but I haven't yet done, and I won't know if I'll ever achieve those things. Some are, like a wish list of things I would like to do. Like I would love to drive out to California, get in my car and just take off and drive through all the states. I would love to travel with my son and go to every Major League Baseball park and see a baseball game because I'm a big baseball fan, and it's great bonding time with my son. But is it realistic? I don't think so. First of all, it's very expensive, and I am struggling to just pay my mortgage right now. So things like that are not real, but they're in my mind of things that I would love to do. I would love to take my whole family and go to Disney World. But if I went to Disney World for a week, that would be probably 2 mortgage payments and then some. So I can't do that right now. So I have to find the ways to try to plan those things when I'm financially able to. I'm not able to work. I'm on disability. And legitimately so. I struggle every day. I'm depressed. but I'm trying to cope and trying to do the best I can. And one of the things that helps me is I love dressing up. And I'm gonna see if I have enough time to share some of the dresses that I have. I have dresses because those are what I love to wear. And I started out wearing dresses as a 4-year-old. So let me see if there's any way that I can share them. Obviously I won't be able to dress in them right now because I don't know how to start my camera and continue it and piece it together. I have a lot to learn about making videos, and hopefully one day I'll get discovered, or I'll get somebody that will truly take the interest in helping me to get my message across. You know, I do YouTube videos because I want to help people, and I'm not doing it to get noticed. I'm doing it to try to touch someone, to try to help them, because I know what the pain is like. And believe me, it is extremely painful. So if I can help one person, I'm not asking to help the world. I'm just asking to help one person to feel that they can empower themselves and be true to who they are, whether they're transgender, whether they're shy, whether they're going through severe depression, or they're alcoholic, whatever they are. If I can help them to overcome their struggle and find peace in their life and accept themselves, then I've done something worthwhile. I'm trying to do the same thing for my son who's autistic, because my son means the world to me. I have a wife and a son who I must live for, to protect. And I was so depressed. At one point I felt that the only way I could protect my family was to commit suicide, so my wife would get my life insurance policy. She could pay the house and then move into a larger house, because our house is very modest. I overpaid for it, and it's not even worth what our mortgage balance is. So the only way out was to end my life. My wife would get my monies, and then she could take care of Maddie and go to a bigger house. But then what would that do? It would devastate my son. So it's not really realistic. So here's some dresses that I have that I would love to share if I could. This is one of them. It's a nice pink dress, and I wish I could show it to you more, but here's another dress that I absolutely love, and it's a black dress with white bordering. I don't know if you can really get a good look at it, but I love it. This is one of my cute dresses that I love. It's a dress that I want to go out in one of these days. I love it so much. And I have my pink dress, obviously. Pink is one of my favorite colors, especially for a dress. This is my pink dress, and I love it. And you've seen me in some videos.